And I remember the day finally came that I was going to the MTC. I was living in Arizona, and I actually came home. I came up a couple days early because I have a cousin that lives here in Provo, or in Orem. So my cousin dropped me off, and I'm grateful it was my cousin and not my parents, because I was already sad to say goodbye to my cousin, but I could only imagine if it would have been my parents that I was saying goodbye to, that I don't know how I would have handled it. But so I remember my first day in the MTC, and going through getting my name tag, and having it really become real that, no, you really are a missionary now. And from the very get-go, I mean, the day you get in the MTC, the training begins. And I remember going up to my room, I put my stuff down, and most of the other sisters that were in my room most of them had already showed up, so their stuff was already there. And then I remember the first time we came together in my district, there were 12 of us, so there were 6 elders and there were 6 sisters, and all but 2 of the elders were going to Mexico, and then all 6 of us sisters were going, let's see, me and my MTC companion were both going to Quito, so we were going to the same mission. And then we had 2 other sisters that were going to Bolivia, and then 2 sisters who were going to different missions, but were both going to Peru. And so it was kind of fun to have a mixture of where people were going. Regardless, we were all learning Spanish. And I remember, I want to say it was Hermano Black that came in first, of my MTC teachers. And I remember he came in and he just started talking to us in Spanish. And I was like, well, I don't know a single thing you're saying right now. And as time went on, obviously we kind of learned stuff. But I remember being like, okay, if I can't understand you, how am I going to be when I get to Ecuador? And with native speakers who've spoken it their whole life, and listening to this gringa trying to speak their language. But that was only the beginning of that day. Later that afternoon, when we went back to our room to actually kind of unpack stuff, I remember looking through my pamphlets, and there was one that it told you your mailbox or your mail address, and then like your expected departure date. And I remember having a miniature heart attack, because I knew I was supposed to be in the MTC at this time for 9 weeks. And so when I opened this and I saw, hey, Hermana Reed, your expected departure date is November 24th. I kind of had like I said, a mini heart attack, because it was November 3rd, and I was like, wait, I'm not supposed to leave in 3 weeks. But as time went on, we found out we were actually going to be going to the Peru MTC for another 6 weeks before we went to our missions. So for me, before I went to Ecuador. And I was like, okay. And so I took advantage of those 3 very short weeks that I had in Provo, and because I was nervous to go to Peru, and not knowing what it was going to be like down there. And so I remember the MTC in Provo, and the Peru MTC too, but there is such a spirit that there's not really a way to describe it. Being surrounded by, I mean, thousands of missionaries, and in addition to that, we're all in the same boat because we're all just getting started. We're all wondering, why did we actually what did we get ourselves into? And regardless of those questions, the main purpose and the main reason why we're there is because we wanted to serve the Lord, and we wanted to share the gospel. And even on my down days, that was what kept me going. I had to remind myself that, why are you here, and why did you decide to serve? And it always came back to that. I love the Lord, and I want to share the gospel with other people, and I want others to know and to have what I have, which is the gospel in their own lives, and the blessing that it is. And that was I don't remember much of my experience at Provo just because it was short, but I remember when we went to the Peru MTC, it was, they are very, very distinct, and they are very, very different. The Peru MTC can only hold a total of 1,500 missionaries. And in comparison to the Provo MTC that can hold 20,000, 1,500 is like nothing. And it's a combination of elders and sisters, obviously, and so it can change depending. But it was a smaller aspect, and you really got to know mostly all the missionaries that are there, because there's so few of us, that we really kind of had to band together. And it was a very interesting and a very, okay, in the moment I didn't like it, but in the moment I was mad that I had to be in Peru and not in Provo. But as I look back on my experience, I'm very grateful that I got to go to the Peru MTC, because I think it helped me in many, many ways that I didn't see in the moment. We had so I had a missionary, or a companion, who actually was my MTC companion in Provo. We both went down at the same time. So the two of us were companions in class. But in Peru, there's a combination of English speakers and Spanish speakers. And so we would get combined and we get mixed and mingled. So technically I had two companions in Peru. I had an English-speaking companion who we were both struggling to learn Spanish, and then each of us had a Spanish-speaking companion as well. And as hard as it was actually very helpful, because I was forced to have to learn, because in order to communicate and to teach, I had to learn the language. And it wasn't okay, I can't think of this word and I can switch back into English to see if my companion could help me out. But instead it was okay, if I don't know the word, maybe I can describe it so she can help me. And there was a long time where I felt like all I could say was, I testify of the words of my companion, because I didn't know anything else. Especially because in Peru, so in Provo, yeah, we have there's the TRC, and you go and you teach investigators and you progress with them. However, in Peru, on Saturdays, we actually went out into Lima, different areas of Lima, and we actually proselyted. Like, we actually went and knocked on doors, and we taught people, and we contacted. And they always tried their best to put you with a Spanish-speaking missionary, to help you, but also so that conversation could actually occur. And so there were many times where I would be focused in trying to find whatever word I could recognize when my companion started talking, and I would just be like, okay, I heard profeta, got it. Okay, you're talking about the prophet. I can talk about that, which usually it was a sentence, and then I testify the words of my companion, because I would get lost in 30 seconds into the conversation. But that was a very different experience, and a good experience, because it was really an eye-opener of, this is what you're going to be doing for the next 18 months, is out and talking to people. And I really learned that even a simple testimony can go a long way. I had my companion tell me that many times, that even my 3-sentence testimony that I could say at that time, she would always remind me that that's going to touch somebody, because it's not going to be you teaching them, it's going to be the Spirit. And they'll look past the fact that maybe you don't speak right, or maybe you don't understand the language, or maybe you misunderstood what they said. But you're here to represent Christ, and you're here to bring others unto Him, which obviously is the mission. Purpose of a missionary is to bring others unto Christ. And so I was grateful that, one, she was very patient with me, and two, reminded me of those facts.